When I reviewed the original Octopath Traveler almost 5 years ago, I absolutely loved it. I was completely smitten with its art style, its spiritual and artistic connections to the 16-bit JRPGs I grew up with, and its amazing battle system. Playing Octopath Traveler 2, I was excited to see everything I loved about the original return. What's surprising, however, is how little it's advanced in the last half-decade. In fact, outside of the specific stories being told, Octopath Traveler 2 is almost indistinguishable from its predecessor. That means it's just as great in many ways, but that lack of novelty also makes it a little less magical the second time around. Because Octopath Traveler 2 is so similar to its excellent predecessor, there's no reason not to go back and play the original first. But the stories aren't directly connected either, so if you're considering starting the journey here, you should know that once again the name Octopath refers to the 8 playable characters and the paths they follow through the world. You could choose to start with any of them, and after playing through the first hour-long chapter of their story, you're stuck with that character for the rest of the campaign, meaning you can't remove them from your party. You're then free to wander the beautiful tilt-shift world, but areas are more or less locked out by their difficulty level. For example, if you enter an area with a danger level 16 and you're level 5, you're going to be murdered pretty much instantly upon your first encounter. Now you might be thinking to yourself, but I'm a seasoned JRPG veteran. I know a thing or two about how to approach high-level zones, but I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. If the area says it's 16, you best have a party of characters at or above level 16. Once you do begin wandering in your level-appropriate areas, you'll come across new towns with new characters. Upon meeting a new character, you're given the option to play through their first chapter or just add them to your party. I like that it gives you the choice, since I prefer powering my way through games and asking questions later, but what I didn't like was discovering fairly late in the campaign how important it is to actually play through each chapter yourself. You're just going to have to trust me to avoid spoilers, but it's too bad it ends up feeling like a deceptive choice. Day or night can be toggled at will, so it's more like switching between modes than something you have to wait around for. You see, each character has a pair of abilities, one for the day and one for the night. It's pretty great because there are some characters you need to interact with who only show up at night, so you can just switch at will rather than drudge across town and visit an inn or just wait for the time to change. Throne, the thief I chose as my starting character, pickpockets people during the day and ambushes them by night, putting them to sleep. The ambush skill is useful, say, when a doorway is blocked by an NPC, and pickpocket is a great way to load up on items without having to visit the shops. It's win-win. Other characters' abilities include recruiting townspeople to summon during battles, fighting townspeople to learn special combat moves, and capturing monsters to call back in during encounters, just to name a few. Some of them are basically reskins of other characters' abilities, like recruiting followers is the most common of the skills, for example, but it comes in really handy when you have 2 or 3 extra sets of hands that you can summon during a battle. I like the system because it lets you pick and choose companions for future fights, but you can also just steal their stuff too, and they don't even mind. Each of the 8 characters has their own multi-chapter story to progress through, but I really liked how they're all quite different in tone and scope. For example, Hiroki's tale starts off with what's definitely the most epic and open of them all, and most typical of what you'd expect in a massive 80-hour JRPG like this. Meanwhile, Partitio's is much more humble, and yet this simple merchant's story surprised me and ended up being my favorite out of all of them. I especially enjoyed the way Casti's played out, with some entertaining fourth wall breaking moments. In fact, I found all of the individual stories' conclusions satisfying, even if the paths leading up to them didn't always resonate with me, particularly the ones with less at stake. Again, it makes sense once you've completed them, but it's harder to savor a story about a clumsy dancer trying to become famous in the moment when someone else is fighting to take back the stolen throne of their country. But all the stories are a definite improvement from the original, even if HBO isn't going to be optioning any of them for a gritty drama anytime soon. It's fortunate that I'm still a fan of the excellent turn-based battle system from the first game because it returns almost unchanged here. Each enemy has one more weak point to uncover by hitting them with a weapon or elemental attack. When you find the weakness of an enemy type, one of the little boxes below them will turn into an icon representing that attack, so you always know going forward, hey, this guy is allergic to ice. I really enjoy the extra dimension this system brings to fights, forcing me to think hard about the fastest way to break an enemy's weaknesses while saving my best attacks to maximize their impact. My one complaint with uncovering weak points is that after a lifetime of turn-based JRPGs, I've grown accustomed to a certain predictability with them, but enemy weaknesses here often feel entirely random. If you encounter an enemy that's clearly made of ice, the vocabulary of JRPGs and, physics would suggest that creature is going to be weak to fire, but in Octopath Traveler, that's rarely the case at all. That frozen elemental could actually be weak to light magic, or to ice for some reason. It seems very arbitrary. I'm glad I didn't have to uncover weaknesses every time, because there is a fair amount of grinding involved in Octopath Traveler 2, which, obviously, opinions differ on the subject, but I find grinding in RPGs almost meditative, as long as putting in a little extra effort before a boss battle pays off in the end. You won't progress your party if you don't spend some time on that grind, as the leveling required to get to the next part of the story isn't achieved simply by following the path laid out. You're gonna have to do some back and forth and running in circles and leveling up before you can move on. That being said, if you enter into a danger level 14 area and reach the boss with a party at or above level 14, you should be able to defeat it, so I always had a clear idea of just how far off I was. You can brute force your way through some of the earlier bosses, just like in any JRPG, but the ability systems, weakness exploits, and battle point bonuses forced me to get pretty strategic with my thinking in order to do so. That being said, the final boss sucks so very much. Once again, I am smitten by Octopath Traveler and its style, but 5 years after the original, it doesn't quite hit as hard. So little has changed about its battles, and this sequel sticks a little too closely to the original systems without expanding on them too much. Especially now that the 2D 3D art style is an established look, the still lovely visuals just don't stand out as much anymore. That said, the combat system is still quite fun, and figuring out the best course of action to exploit weak points, knock an enemy unconscious, and then unload on them with as much power as you can remains a very satisfying pace. I did find myself much more invested in the characters and their stories this time around, and the way it comes together in the end is more interesting and cohesive than the first. If you liked Octopath Traveler, or even any of the Bravely Default games, Octopath Traveler 2 is another good old-fashioned 80-hour JRPG. It just might be one you feel like you've played before. For more, check out our reviews of Theater Rhythm, Final Bar Line, or Fire Emblem Engage. And for everything else, stick with IGN.
行くよ。おしまい。